Hello again. Now we're going to start creating objects here in 3ds Max. For this, we're going to be using the creation panel here at the right side and make sure that we are at the standard primitives, just like the last lecture. So here we have the box, the sphere, the cylinder, the torus, the teapot, the text plus, cone, geosphere, tube, pyramid, and plane. So they are all very basic geometries. Now let's get inside one of these viewports, and remember that we can access it through Alt plus W. And now I'm going to start creating all of these objects so that we can see how these ones work. So let's create a box. We already seen how to create this. However, if we want to create it in a different way, we can start by holding the control key. So you can see now that it's basically creating it in a proportional way starting from the center point. And once I let go, I can now just give it a height. Once I'm done creating an object here in 3ds Max, I will just right click. So let's do that again. And now you can see that the box is still highlighted, but if I right click, it ends that creation. Let's delete this. Now the sphere, it's a very simple one. So I'm pressing Ctrl every time so that the creation starts from the center point and it increases its scaling in a proportional way. W for the gizmo to appear. Now the cylinder, very simple. And now one thing that we should mention is that all of these simple objects have different values on them. So if I go to the second tab here next to the plus icon, I will enter the modify tab. I can change the values. So I have the length, the width, and the height of this box. And I can just change it like so by playing around with the sliders here. So now you'll notice that I cannot see the lines that are creating this box. So if I press F4, I will see the meshes that are actually creating all of these objects. So make sure that you press F4 for this. Now, if I go to the sphere, I will also have another type of parameters, this time a radius, for instance. I can also change the number of segments, which will make my sphere a little bit more smooth and precise. But let's not play around with this much, because if your computer doesn't have enough memory, given this more than 100 meshes can mean that we're going to be ending up with lots of polygons. We can also check the number of polygon count here in 3ds Max by just pressing the 7 key. So over here I can see that I have a total of 5,268 polygons and 2,640 vertices. We will be checking this regularly to see if we are in the limits. Now, passing the 3 million count of any of these two, it's going to take a toll on our PC. So if I change this number of segments, you can see that this keeps increasing. So it's not worth it to have so many meshes or so many polygons just for a sphere. The same thing with the cylinder. Here I have the height and the sides. So if I just increase the height and then play around with the sides, I'm going to create a more perfect cylinder. But we have to be careful with the polygons and vertices count. So let's keep going. Now I have the torus. And again, we have certain parameters that we can change and play around with. So next up, if I go again to my plus icon, I'll just create a teapot here. And this teapot is a pretty interesting geometry, and it's actually used for many examples. We're going to be playing around with it later on. Now we have the text plus, and we can actually write any type of text that we want just by going down here in the parameters. So I'm just going to type in emunac here. I'm going to right click just to end my creation. I have also the cone. So the cone actually needs 3 different steps, like so. The geosphere. Now we have a tube. And again, I can just play around with the modifiers here by going to this tab and changing the sides and the height segments just to make this a little bit more smooth. I have the pyramid. So I'm just holding the control key. And I have the plane also. Okay, so that's it for standard primitives. Now, if I wanted to zoom in to an object, I only have to press the Z key. So select the object and Z it. Now again, if I go to the modify, you can see that I can only edit the length, the width, and the height of this object. But what if I wanted to edit it a little bit further than that? I will right click, I will go down here to convert to, and I have the Editable Poly. Now if I go to the modifier, you can see that all of my parameters have been switched to this selections. So let's go over through these selections. First of all, we have the vertex. So if I click here, you will be able to see that now the vertex from this box have been activated, and each one of them has their own gizmo. Now to select multiple objects here in 3ds Max, we have to press the Control key, like so. Now I can edit only the vertices. The same thing with this sphere. So if I deselect by clicking again on the vertex, I can now choose this sphere. And this sphere, I can also change it to an editable poly. So if I right click and I hit the convert to and convert to editable poly, I will also be able to see these types of selections. The parameters no longer exist. So if I again click the vertex, all of the vertices from this sphere have been activated. And I can choose multiple vertices like so and play around with them. But keep in mind that this is still selected. If I want to choose any other object here in 3ds Max, I can't. So make sure that you unselect this by clicking it again. One thing to keep in mind is that all of these options have their own shortcuts. So if I press vertex, I can unselect and select it again by pressing the 1 key on our keyboard. Now let's go back to our box, which is no longer a box, it's actually an editable poly. And if I go to the edge now, I will be able to select only the edges from this box. I can access this with the 2 key. So 1 is for vertex, 2 is for edge, and so on. So 3 is for border, 4 is for polygon, and 5 is for the entire element. So let's see what the border does. And right now I don't have any borders, and the borders will only be available if I have an open face. So to do that, I'm going to go to the polygon and I'm going to select any faces here in the geometry. And to delete one of these, I only have to delete it with my delete key. Now I have an opened border here. So if I go back to border, I can select it. One thing to keep in mind is that all of these options, like the gizmo, are always available here. So if I turn this to a rotation by pressing my E key, I can rotate this like so. And now let's make this a little bit higher. And I can also scale it up or down by hitting the R key or going to this option right here. And I can change the type of transform that I want by pressing R multiple times until I get to this one, which will control the geometry proportionally. If I press R again, I will only be able to control the axis. So let's press R again just to scale this down proportionally. Now if I pick again the border with my 3 key, I can go ahead and type in E and keep rotating like so. So we start to see some kind of interesting geometry here. Now number 4, as we've seen, it's the polygons which control the faces of our geometries. So again, to unselect, and because I want to select the sphere over here, I'll press the 4 key again and then select this guy over here. Okay, so I'm going to select with my control like this, multiple faces. Now each one of these options have their own editable options. So we have edit polygons down here. And inside the edit polygons, I have the extrude option, the bevel option, the bridge option, outline and inset. Now these are the most used for the polygons, but I can just right click and you can see that I also have the main tools right here, extrude, bevel, outline and inset. This is a little bit more efficient rather than just going over here and trying to find the extrude option. So if I right click, I can access it like so. Now make sure that you will always use this little box at the left side because this will open the settings for the extrude options. So if I don't press this box, I will only have this slider to work with, which is also kind of useful. However, if we want to be more precise about our transformations, I will right click and use this box here. So now I can say that I want to extrude these faces to 10 centimeters, for instance. And I will just click the check. Okay. Now let's see what the bevel does. So if I go to settings here, you can see now that the bevel works in a different way. And I have the height and the outline. So I can play with the height, and then I can just increase or reduce its outline. So it's basically an offset for the face. I'm gonna hit the check, and now the bridge option. So let's pick this side, this face, and by hitting Ctrl, I can go all the way back here and select another face from the back. Now I want to join both of them by just using the bridge option. So I'm gonna click once on the bridge, and you can see that both of them have been connected through a void. Now I have the outline, which is basically an offset. I'm going to click on this and then make an outline. So it's just offsetting this face right here. If I inset it, I will create a copy of this particular rectangle here. I'm going to increase it or decrease it. And then again, if I press the right click, I can extrude this. Now let's delete one of these faces. So let's hit the 4 key to activate our polygons. I'm going to select one of the faces and delete it. Now let's pick the border option. So because it's an opened surface, I can play around with the border. I can also extrude this border by right clicking and extrude like this. And I also have the width. So if I want to reset this value, I would just have to right click like so. Now I can edit this value. I can go in or out. I can also use the gizmo. So if I just hit my W key, I can move this around with my gizmo. And now it's a good chance to see how we can use this view tab or view option that we saw last time. But before that, let's just scale this. So I'm going to hit the R key, and by holding shift, I can start to increase this border like so without losing my void. Then hit again my W key. And now you can see that my gizmo is not aligned. It's a little bit tilted to the side. So to align this to the current face, I can go to View and go to Local Align. This way I will align my gizmo to this face. And now if I press Shift again, I can start to extrude this border. And now my R key, just to scale it down. And again, by hitting my W key and Shift, remember to be holding Shift, I can start doing this kind of shapes. R key again, Shift, extruding using the scale option. Now if I want to cap this, I don't want it to be an open surface anymore. I would just right click and go to cap. Now let's go to our vertex options to activate all of the vertices from this polygon here. By using the vertex, I can start to create new faces here. For instance, let's grab these two guys like this, and I'm going to connect them. So if I go back again to the edit vertices option, I'm going to connect these two. You can see now it's been divided into two, and I'm going to actually change my viewport from edged faces to clay. Make sure that you've pressed F4 to show all of the curves, and this way we can see the geometry a little bit better. Now if I go back to my faces up here, you can see that I've created two different faces by connecting these two vertices. So let's go back to vertices by pressing 1 or going here to the vertices options. I can also remove vertices. So for instance, if I pick this one and click the remove, it's going to remove it, and it's going to create this whole new face here. I can grab this face and maybe delete it and grab again my border with the 3 key, not just by going over here all the way to border, but it's more efficient to press the 3. Again, I can just start to extrude in this guy like so. Now remember that I'm still in local aligned, so let's change this to view again. Let's hit the 3 key to get out from this option again. Now finally we have the element, and the element will basically just select the whole mesh. So we call all of these geometries meshes because they're made of polygons. Some software, such as Rhino for instance, uses NURBS. So whenever we're trying to import any geometries from a software like Rhino, we will first have to convert these NURBS to meshes. So you can see in this cylinder, for example, that we have multiple squares that are forming this cylinder. Here in the torus too. Alright, now we've seen the basics from the creation for our standard primitives, how to manipulate them in a basic way. We're just going to move on to splines for the next lecture. So I'll see you there.